All right, it happened. Gamers Nexus looking at Bazzite for benchmarks. This has got me very, very excited. The first prototypes of Bluefin and U-Blue were all done on a Gamers Nexus mat. Actually, this mat in this video, and I still have all my stuff. Let's see what Steve has to say, because he's saying some very interesting things, and I want to talk about the model today and Cloud Native and Boot C. So let's go.
We needed to start with a single distro. The frontrunners were SteamOS, which we already have experience with on the deck, CachyOS, or Bazzite. SteamOS was our first choice, but it's not officially available for desktop, so that ruled it out for now. CachyOS should have more cutting-edge performance than Bazzite and might be more flexible, but potentially at the cost of some stability. Bazzite is popular. It's built for gaming. Thousands of you requested we test it specifically, and that's the most important part to us. It's
the most important part to them. How many people are using it in the first place? Which is metrics driven. I want you to think about that.
Developers have made executive decisions that simplify our own choice making, and they've even contacted us, and most of
All right, made executive decisions. These are, a lot of these that he's going to talk into are actually about the model, on why Bazzite's image-based approach, the cloud-native approach being built on containers is something that's really unique, and we're going to get to it here in a minute when he talks about it.
all, Wendell of Level 1 Techs even recommended it as a stable test platform for us to get started with.
The shortest answer I could give you is probably Bazzite. Bazzite is good because it is an immutable distro, and that is important because it is a big philosophical difference in how the system is managed.
Okay, so first of all, let's do it all over again. There's no such thing as immutable distros. You cannot do what Steve is describing with Btrfs snapshots. You can't ask, hey, 10,000 Bazzite users, go rebase, to this one specific image from 3 weeks ago with file system snapshots, right? This is all a container-based workflow that's all done in the cloud, and it's all done by images that are published in a registry. So that gives us the ability to tag images with dates, drivers, all of that kind of stuff. And that's what gives you the ability to get what Steve talks about next. Good work, Wendell.
A lot of the Linux enthusiast community is used to tuning and tweaking things and finding ways to optimize or min-max stuff or fix problems that arise.
Right. So Bazzite's value is we do that and then burn that onto the image for you, so you can get that shared benefit of someone else doing that fix for you.
This we have to address right away, because testing's a little different from use, where we need a test platform that's predictable and is stable, and most importantly, we have to minimize our own judgment calls wherever possible, because we don't want something that is open to change because it was a human decision.
Okay, so this is the entire reason we started this project, right? When you make an image, you know what's on there. That is the only difference between Bazzite and, one of the major differences between Bazzite and traditional Linux distros that people use, right? It's an image, you know what's on there. The people that make it know exactly what's on there. And more importantly, when you report an issue and you're with a bunch of people, it's easier to determine where the bug was introduced if everyone is able to rebase to an image, whether you have it or not, right? So an example of this is we had a regression with Mutter in Bluefin, and someone just went back on the daily snapshots and they found the exact day that change landed in Bluefin. First of all, we were able to tell the users, hey, if you're suffering from this issue, rebase to this, and at least write it out until we get the fix from upstream, which is in progress. In the meantime, we're able to know exactly where the regression lies. Now imagine if you're doing benchmarking testing or any of that kind of stuff, you're able to basically nail down the exact versions of all the drivers and everything that's on the image. Now, Bazzite doesn't do this today, but you could also, remember, this is just Git trees, this is just GitOps. You could ship any version of anything in as many branches as you want, right? Bazzite only has a few branches, but if we had thousands of new users that had an excuse to make instrumented builds with benchmarking stuff on there, different versions, you could try different patches, things like that. All of that is possible, right? This has nothing to do with immutable distros. This is GitOps in the cloud, making a container image. Let's continue.
And as an example of that, if you start to min-max and optimize or fix bugs for how one device runs, now we really need to put that equal level of effort into all of them.
Yeah,
and it's just not viable. Or we don't have the experience to do it properly. That's the part I'm really more worried about. So that's why for us, testing something closer to usable out-of-box state is going to help railroad us into a fair configuration for all vendors, as we can always fall back on the rigid decision-making where it exists. Now, Bazzite Desktop Edition comes in 2 main versions, NVIDIA and non-NVIDIA. Just like the S&P 500 at this point. After speaking with both the devs and Wendell.
So I do this too. I keep a sticker on my SSDs with the OS on there, because these systems are, you can move the drive between systems. So this is a great tip. I do this as well, to put what you have on there on the drive, and then it's done forever.
Of level 1 techs, we set up 1 drive for each. The OS comes fully stocked with drivers and game launchers, so we didn't need to do any significant configuration after installation.
Hell yeah.
Which also means that our test benches reflect the default user experience as much as possible.
Hugely important.
You still have to be careful with cross-contamination, but it's by doing different things. Bazzite is an atomic bootable container image. There's a full explanation on the FAQ page, as well as advantages versus SteamOS. But the bottom line is that you can just grab an image and slap it on your system. Bazzite's goals are stability and compatibility, and recoverability in case those first 2 don't work out for you. It's intentionally not the highest performance, most bleeding edge OS, but it's a lot lower friction for beginners, and it's a lot less prone to oh shit moments where, I don't know, it turns out
where you listen to Linux users
during tests without our knowledge or something. According to Antheus from the Bazzite dev team, he said to us, quote, "We used to include some gaming-oriented kernel optimizations, but as of August, we do not anymore. We found that most of the testing for those changes involved running, for example, Rocket League at 600 hertz while doing something like compiling a kernel. Nobody does that or cares." Just gonna interrupt to say, a bold assumption of the Linux community, we await your comments post-haste.
We don't have to listen to those people either.
Anyway, other than that, he said, quote, "We found those optimizations could cause a 2 to 30% performance degradation, where the higher end was on Intel CPUs with heterogeneous cores. This actually ended up hurting our reputation, which is very unfortunate because the version of one of the optimizations we used had a bug. Moving forward, we will no longer make these sorts of changes, so performance on Bazzite should mirror Fedora and Arch, but with more stability as we skip minor versions and delay the major a bit," end quote.
Something that I do for my systems is, after hanging out with kernel developers, I stick to the vanilla kernel as much as possible.
During a test cycle for Windows, we freeze the updates for the period of that test cycle. It typically takes us about a week. We're pretty good at it now. But even if we want to run that data for longer, we've found through validation, calibration, lots of cross comparison, and update A/B testing over a year even, that a lot of times there's not big differences. It really depends. Sometimes Windows ships a major change, like for CPUs more than GPUs. But for the most part, the data can remain fairly shelf stable.
This is really good, and this is why I like these images that Bazzite has with those image tags, right? Like once you do it, like in their bench config, they would just make sure that automatic updates are off, and you would always get the exact version on that image every single time in perpetuity. Now, Bazzite only keeps 90 days of image archives, but I could see someone just keeping a year's worth of Bazzite images and then coming back in a year and being like, let's look at the year's worth of AMD driver improvements, for example. This is all possible because you could just rebase back to, you can go back and check every single month if you want and every single major release. This is all possible. No sweat with boot C,
so to speak. In the very least, we can pause the updates for the 1 week we need to test it without major downsides. Now with Linux, there are a lot more layers, and those updates may come at a much faster pace and sometimes asynchronously with each other. Plus our testing is a lot slower. 1, because it's not automated, and 2, because it's just slower. So our instinct is to freeze versions as much as possible without needing to mod things. Linux has a number of pieces of software, though, that regularly update.
Yeah, so this will be tricky, right? Because so for something like on AMD Intel, the kernel version and the Mesa version you'll have to account for. And on NVIDIA, obviously the NVIDIA driver there. So this is why the release notes for Bazzite always tell you the kernel version, the Mesa version, so that you should be able to look at the grid of all the releases across a year and be like, okay, these are the 6 images that are most important to me when I'm testing, the next 6 months worth of whatever. I'm going to end the video with this because the rest of it is excellent and full of highly details. Steve mentions how the benchmarking and stuff is not automated. Steve, if you hear this breaks my heart. Wherever you're based, let's try to get a Kubernetes nerd in your lab or something like that, because really our project is focused on automation, right? you get this. Hold on, there's Bazzite, right? That is the artifact that comes out of our automation, right? And there's definitely a path forward for automating benchmarks and things across Linux, and I think that's something that should be distribution agnostic, and we can work together with all the other ones to figure out the best way to do this. I'm definitely interested in shipping whatever Steve is cooking as fast as possible to as many people as possible, because I do feel there is a path for us to take data like this from YouTubers and get it in the hands of kernel developers. But in order to hear that idea, you're going to have to keep an eye out for Michael Tunnell's channel. We had an interview that we did at KubeCon, and I talk about this a little bit and where we can go forward from this. So awesome day for Linux gaming. It's, man, being on Gamers Nexus is just so dope, so dope. Thanks very much, Steve, and we'll see you all.